Okay, ladies, gentlemen, welcome back. Nobody got lost. Everybody still has their bags, so that's one thing I can tick off the risk list. Well done, guys. I just have a few announcements before we begin this afternoon's panel debate. I just have three things I want to discuss. First of all, the World Potato Congress continent reports. I've had one or two questions about where are they and why aren't we seeing them. They are in the Strathblane Hall. That's behind the registration desks where you came in. They're up on a plasma screen right now, but we recognise that's not enough for you, so we'll be bringing them into some of these auditoria tomorrow, so you'll get a lot more opportunity to see those. So do bear with us. But they are an exciting data set for you all to consider, so have a look at those more tomorrow. The second thing I'd like to introduce, also down in reception, some of you may have already seen the photographic competition that we've been running. This is kindly sponsored by Mistral, who are offering a prize of photography equipment. And for us, having talked about sustainability, having talked about nutrition, having talked about the vibrancy of the industry, we want to capture the image that best represents the industry, okay? Now, Alan spoke this morning about the challenges on his farm. I don't know whether he was harvesting in that much snow, but there's plenty to go for here. We've had 5 categories. On-farm challenges, looking at the markets. We've looked at people and potatoes, science and technology and machinery, and the future. Okay, so lots to play for. We've had a really, really good response to this competition. All amateur photography. We've had entries in their tens of thousands. We've had entries from India, from South Africa, as far afield as China, and some from just down the road here in Scotland. It's your choice. It's your decision. There are voting slips. If you go down into the foyer, you will find this presentation up on screen. Okay. Have a vote. It's your choice. We will pick a winner very, very shortly once those votes are counted. So do have a go at that. Now, what I'd also like to talk about is a new project in trading. Okay. We are going to introduce something called wristband trading. This is very important. We have a number of people who've booked for the event. Sadly, they've forgotten about their partners, their spouses, the people who've travelled with them. We've had a lot of people roll up just in the last 2 days who hadn't pre-booked, and they're also looking for something to eat tomorrow night. Okay. Now, the truth of the matter is this is a resource issue for us now. The gala dinner is fully subscribed, but we would like to introduce the opportunity for you to trade. So, there may be some of you who are no longer hungry. There may be some of you who've found someone else to eat with. The story is yours, okay? But I would like to invite you, if you feel the need to avoid the gala dinner tomorrow night, then you are welcome to visit reception either tonight or tomorrow morning and check in your wristband so that those who really want that opportunity can get to the gala dinner. It's the best we can do. It's a pre-ordered, fresh menu, and there's little change we can make at this stage, so do bear with us. Okay, what will happen then is those who are currently on the waiting list, they can get down to reception Tuesday lunchtime and just see what the book looks like. We can't make any promises, but there may be some opportunities for you. So visit reception at lunchtime tomorrow. Okay, that's enough from me. I'm going to hand over now. It's the question and answer session. Just a reminder, we talked about some Q&A channels this morning. A reminder, if you turn to page 34 of your delegate guide, you'll see those channels again. We'll keep the channels running through the night and into tomorrow for tomorrow's Q&A. The response has been fantastic. We have been tweeted, retweeted, and retweeted, so it's looking really good for us. But I'm not going to talk you through that debate. I'm going to introduce a very good friend of mine, the CEO of Ozveg, Richard Mulcahy, is going to talk us through the debate. And I'd also like to invite to join the stage here Anton, Maureen, Nick, Colin, and Albert, who will participate. So thank you.
Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and greetings from Australia, and thank you for the opportunity to be part of this. I'm pleased to say that there's around 40 or 50 Australians over here as well for this event, and we pay great credit to Rob and his team for the organisation and the hospitality we've enjoyed already so far. The participants this afternoon include Dr. Colin Chhatra, who's the Director General of the International Water Management Institute in Sri Lanka. We're also joined on stage by Dr. Anton Havercourt, Plant Research International from the Netherlands. Also this afternoon we have participating Dr. Maureen Story, President and CEO, Alliance for Potato Research and Education, USA, and I enjoyed your presentation this morning. Also Mr. Nick Vermont, Regional CEO of McCain Foods, also one of our morning presenters. Mr. Albert Warder, who is Director of Water Farms and WPC Incorporated from the USA. And I think I have covered all my panellists, have I? Great. Ladies and gentlemen, we've had a number of questions sent through Twitter feeds, emails, faxed and handwritten questions. And I'm going to lead off with those. If there's time permitting, we will take questions also from the floor, and there will be two of the team there with roving mics. But we'll try and get through as many as we can because I know you're keen to have issues addressed. I might lead off with a question for Anton, if I could. And we received an inquiry: how can potatoes exploit the issue of elevated CO2 emissions? And if so, do we have the varieties to do it?
The question is whether we have the varieties to reduce the CO2 imprint. Well, let's first start. There are big differences. If you have, for instance, early varieties, they are known. If you want to get good yields of early varieties, you have to give more nitrogen. And yet you still harvest them early, so that means that they will have a low nitrogen efficiency. And nitrogen is for 30 to 40% responsible for the total CO2 footprint. So when it comes to varieties, in general, you can say the later they are, the less nitrogen they have to apply, because they can acquire for a longer period from mineralization and so. So that's probably the biggest clue I can give. Later varieties, a lower footprint. Having said that, if you have varieties of the same lateness, then certain varieties, they will give you more French fries per ton of raw material than others. So if you have varieties that require the same amount of input, but they have a higher recovery in the factory, then that automatically will mean that it also have a lower footprint. There are some differences in varieties when it comes to recovery after drought, some drought resistance. If they are able to recover after drought better than others, then they will also make better use of all the plowing and planting and fertilization and disease control that you dedicated to them. So that's maybe the third opportunity that varieties have to reduce footprints.
Thank you. And I have another question that's somewhat in the same vein for either Anton or any other member of the panel. The question that we've had is, are we focusing too much on CO2 issues when there are other indicators to be considered, such as water availability and so on? Would anyone on the panel like to make a comment on that as well?
Other issues such like? So you said other issues such like?
Well, our questioner says, are we focusing too much on the CO2 issue when there are other indicators as well to be considered for the future of the industry? And examples such as water availability and so on. So,
well, I think in any system, in any industry, we can't detach water from energy and emissions. So I think, and that was, to me, explained pretty well in Anton's presentation with your farm tool, looking at the amount of diesel or electricity used in the system, which was one of the big contributors to CO2. And if we're looking specifically at water, essentially you won't have water if you don't use energy, and quite often that energy won't be generated if you haven't got water. So I think the two go hand in glove, and we have to look at this from a holistic point of view.
Would anyone else on the panel have a view they wish to offer?
I'm sorry, I'm having a terrible time with the echo in here. Would you please repeat the question?
Yes, the question is, are we focusing too much on CO2 issues, CO2 emissions, when there are many other indicators that we need to consider as an industry? And I think some of the issues, the examples used were water availability and supply and a range of other issues. Is there too much focus going into the CO2 issue?
Okay, as far as I understand your question, and the CO2 issue is concerned with sustainability on the farm and in Idaho specifically, we have most of our farmland in Idaho is irrigated by groundwater, which is water that's pumped from the aquifer, and this water comes from our nearby Rocky Mountain snowpack. And so in most years we have adequate water supplies, but we're always concerned about the efficient use of that water. And most of the valley has converted over the past 20 years to more efficient low pressure, fine micro-sized droplet application of irrigation water. In conserving that water, a lot of our electricity that runs our pumps, that pumps this water, are powered by hydroelectric generation, which is very prominent in our area in the Intermountain West with all the high mountain reservoirs and hydroelectric dams that we have, so we're quite fortunate in that respect. As far as the CO2 issue, I think we're doing what everyone in the world is doing, in the developed world is doing, and in adhering to a lot of the regulations that have come about also that are driving this, which is energy efficient tractors cost more, but they do more on a gallon of diesel and very much more efficient. What's really challenging us in our own market today is because we are in Idaho and we're quite a ways from most large metropolitan market areas, we have a relatively high carbon footprint in getting our product to market. And it is a challenge. A lot of the retailers in the United States are doing what they call buying local in order to maybe lower the carbon footprint and bring that local produce to their market. So it's a challenge for us folks way out a ways from the market in Idaho because we are forced to utilize a fair amount of fuel, fossil fuel, in order to get our products to market.
Thank you very much. Now I have a question for Dr. Maureen Storey. The question is, how important is it for the potato industry to work to promote healthy oils usage with potatoes to combat the belief that potatoes make you fat? And then related to the question, our questioner has said, is this belief because of the starch or the use of excessive saturated fats in cooking?
Well, I think it's very important to try to use oils in cooking potatoes, whether you're French frying them or frying them at home, to try to eliminate as much of the trans fat and saturated fats as you possibly can. I saw a paper just a couple of days ago that was published by the Food and Drug Administration that has shown that the cooking oils in the United States have made a dramatic shift in the amount of trans fatty acids and saturated fats that are in quick service French fried potatoes. And in fact, with the exception of 1 out of, I think, 5 or 6 of the chains that were tested, the trans fatty acid content of French fries was down far less than a half a gram per serving. So the changes have been made already. It's just that people don't know it yet. And so that's part of the issue that we have to address as well, is not just making the changes in the fats to healthier fats, but also communicating that so that people know, particularly health professionals, know that those changes have been made. And I don't think that a lot of health professionals know that the changes have been made. And that's one of the things that the Alliance for Potato Research and Education is striving to do, is to take those facts and make them known to health professionals so that they know the facts as well.
I might just ask you, following on from that, how are you measuring the impact with the health professionals? Are you seeing an improved attitude in terms of their views towards the industry?
Well, it's a little early for me to tell at this point. APRI's been in existence for 11 months, so I think that time will tell if we have made an impact. I think just anecdotally, when I presented our data at Experimental Biology last month, the scientists that stopped by our posters were really quite stunned at the level of calories from French fried potatoes as well as white potatoes. And by stunned, I mean that they did not realize how small the contribution of calories is from white potatoes and French fried potatoes for adults as well as children and teenagers. So I think that we are seeing some changes now, very early changes, but as we go out to the health professional societies and give our presentations at breakfasts and wherever we can go, people are very impressed with the data because they read the newspapers too. And so they're, as I would have said in my previous job, they're drinking the Kool-Aid as well. And so it's our job to help them understand that the facts are that children, adults, and adolescents are not consuming the amount of calories from white potatoes and French fried potatoes as they may be led to believe.
Nick, would you like to add a comment to this? I know you gave us an interesting presentation this morning on some of the success you've undertaken in the UK with your campaign. Would you care to comment on this issue?
Yeah, I think, as I said this morning, I think in terms of your question about what impact has it had, from definitely being seen as part of the problem, I think, amongst the UK government and other agencies, we would be seen as part of the solution. And the steps that we've taken to reduce saturated fat have been very warmly welcome and recognised.
And obviously reflected in the marketplace with sales improving.
Yep.
Once that message is understood. I've got a question here about resource use. You know, it comes up quite a bit in our country in terms of the amount of water consumed and used and other resources for food production. And I might direct this initially to Anton, but do you have any thoughts you'd care to share with us about the issue of food production versus fuel consumption and resource consumption or resource use by this industry?
I thought that you were going to ask me about fuel consumption or fuel production in the agricultural industry.
Well, it's all related, I think, to what the question is seeking, really.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of talk about biofuels and using resources like land, water, and energy. Even to produce energy, you need energy. It's costing a lot of water. And also in the view of Sir John was saying this morning about the global, let's say, increase of population. Personally, I have very strong hesitations whether we should use those resources to produce fuel. I'd rather go for very small cars and all kind of other things rather than doing this. So that's I think personally is a very unwise use of the resources that we have on our globe. Of course, there are sometimes other arguments. They say, well, we have final resources, but there are other ways to produce energy rather than doing through a very inefficient way of producing, let's say, sugar in sugarcane. Then you make some kind of a brew, kind of a sugarcane beer or whatever, that you have to distill into something that can be ignited in a vehicle. It's a very inefficient way of using solar energy that reaches 1 hectare of land. It's probably still one of the most cheapest ways to produce it compared to some of the other alternatives. But I was just reading a book about how the world will look like in 2100, and then we will laugh about the kind of childish way of trying to produce energy, and then fission and fusion and others capturing solar energy will soon take over this not so clever idea of producing fuels where we should produce food.
Colin, would you like to add some comment on that issue?
Well, I think I share the view that it is using the first generation technologies at least, a very inefficient way of producing fuel. But I think we also have to look at the differences between different countries in that regard. If you take, say, China and India, who actually are producing biofuels using quite a lot of irrigation water, which is very much in competition with food, I think that's not a good way to go. If you, however, compare that with Brazil, which is largely producing ethanol, albeit inefficiently, using rain-fed rather than irrigated production, where there is quite a lot of land, maybe that's, for the time being at least, not quite so bad in terms of competition for the land and water resource. So I think we have to look at each case on its merits, and I guess we have to wait and see whether or not second-generation biofuels actually give the promise what they're supposed to, or deliver what they promise to do.
Could I just ask some of the panel, and it's probably more in Nick's world than anywhere else, but in terms of the issue of food miles and its role in the marketplace and in retailing, it's sort of had a checkered history in my country where things are transported a long way, but I know in Europe it certainly was the flavour for some time. Is that still a significant issue in your research or in your consumer work?
Yeah, no, I think both in retail and food service sectors in GB today, we're seeing a lot of interest in provenance. I think food miles are part of that, but I think there's other factors as well. Often we believe food manufactured and grown in our own country is somehow better. I think, when there's economic hardship, there's a sense of kind of all pulling together. And whilst it's a little exaggerated at the moment because of the Queen's Jubilee this weekend, if you walk around any supermarket here in GB, you'll see a preponderance of Union Jacks on a wide range of products, both branded and branded and retail. Private label, and also in the food service sector, there's a number of restaurant chains who rely on locally sourced food materials.
So it's still identified as an issue with consumers?
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't pick out and say, well, it impacts sales by X%, but sure, it's certainly very high up there in terms of consumer conversations and issues.
Could I just ask you, Albert, based on your experience in the US market, is that a significant issue there, or doesn't it play out terribly well?
Oh, it's a very significant issue when you consider the length and breadth of the United States or North America in general. For instance, when we load a truck at our facility in southeastern Idaho, it's very likely to go at least 800 to 1,000 miles, and more than likely for an Idaho customer, which typically is an eastern or a southeastern U.S. customer, you're talking about nearly a 3,000 mile ride on a truck. You couple that with some rather archaic trucking regulations in a certain part of the center of the country that only allows 80,000 hundredweight load to go across those central states. It becomes very inefficient in shipping that product across the U.S., and road miles becomes a huge concern. The one thing that we do have going for us in the state of Idaho is we are selling a branded product as an Idaho potato, and so it's in demand enough by major retailers and food service, particularly food service companies, that they're willing to pay for that extra freight to get those Idaho potatoes to a distant market in the eastern seaboard, for instance. But it does have its negative consequences in the carbon footprint that it does leave, and all we can really hope for in that regard is continued progress on biodiesels. New generation trucks are getting much better mileage than they were, and hopefully getting some trucking regulations passed to where we can put more weight on these trucks that are having to go through these central tier of states that have the low gross weight requirements. And the retailers are obviously very much in sync with the whole sustainability issue, and food miles is a big thing, locally grown and produced. It's just a good thing, again, that in Idaho we have a brand name that makes it worth their while to go ahead and invest in those food miles to get that product to market.
Thank you. I've got a few more questions, but there's so many people here for the session, I thought we might take a couple from the floor. Has anyone got a question they'd like to raise of our expert panel here today? Just put your hand up if you wouldn't mind. We've got people with roving mics. Anyone? Don't be shy. Well, look, I'll go on further with some of the other questions. There's a questioner who wants to know the views of the panel, and it's probably particularly in Anton or Colin's area, about your views on the consequences of intensive agricultural activity in desert regions. I know in different parts of the world where there's been a lot of success stories. I know in Israel where we've taken grower tours, they've transformed many parts of that country. But obviously there are other issues that emerge from the environment and so on. Is there a view that you have on that particular activity?
Of agriculture in desert areas? Well, if there is water available from some sustainable source, that would be nice. But if you look in Saudi Arabia, for instance, and they have been growing potatoes since some 30 years with Dutch initiatives and so, but there the water table goes down with a few meters every year. Well, if we have to wonder whether that's sustainable or not. Maybe it's a good use of the water until it's completely gone. It's the same with oil in Saudi Arabia. It's being pumped until it's gone. So in principle, I don't have really to say any real objections against growing potatoes in desert areas. But having said that, if you look at the CO2 footprint, and if I say CO2 footprint, it's not just CO2, because CO2 footprint also means pumping water and dedicating energy to delivering the water to the potato fields and so. Then there are a few issues when it comes to growing potatoes in deserts, especially in sandy deserts with big pivots. And if you also have to pump the water from 40, 50, 60, 70 meters depth sometimes, like they do in Mongolia, for instance, then there are a number of issues. First, you are depleting the water source that is there, that ulteriorly might also be for cattle or for people in future. But if you deplete it for agriculture, then it will be gone. Huh? Also, in the Cool Farm tool, the pumping water from greater and greater depth, if you pump more than 50 meters or 60 meters, it is already responsible for 1/3 of all the energy it costs and CO2 it costs to produce those potatoes. If you have a sandy soil with a big pivot, that means you have to pass every 2 or 3 days, delivering 20, 30 millimeters of water. You have to over-irrigate because you cannot risk and that there's only 80% left. You have to replenish, and 50% of the water is gone. So you usually over-irrigate in sandy deserts, so that costs more water. And the problem is, another problem is that usually within these pivots, the nitrogen and sometimes the potassium is also delivered through the pivot. And with the water that is leached and is lost, a lot of nitrogen is also lost. So sometimes, in not all too good, let's say, management conditions, like I've seen this in Chihuahua, in the north of Mexico, for instance, that there is an overuse of water, overuse of nitrogen, and an enormous amount of pumping. So there are many bad examples of growing potatoes in deserts because of overuse of energy and resources. The only thing that is the resource use efficiency that is very, very good in a desert is land, because there is usually ample of land available, so then it's not a waste of the land as such.
Colin, would you like to?
Yeah, I think this is a question which is all tied up with the issue of trade and food security and food sovereignty. My own view is that where you have water scarcity in desert environments, you should be using that water for the highest value use, and it's probably not going to be growing potatoes. It's probably going to be for some urban or industrial or similar purposes, and you should be sort of importing these bulky commodities from countries where there is plenty of water and trading them on world markets. But there is often a lot of confusion in terms of many governments not only want to be food secure, but they also have a view that they should be secure based on their own growing their own food within that country. Now, I think we've seen another big change very recently, and this is this issue which relates to this, and this is this issue of so-called land grabbing, where some of the Middle East and some Far Eastern countries want to secure their food supply for the future and have been buying up or leasing large areas of largely African countries to do so. Now, I think, again, that might be sensible if it's done in a sensitive way, if it's done in a way which actually encourages capacity building and jobs in the country where they're leasing land. But often it's done a little bit indiscriminately. But I think these are all very complex issues which relate to things such as the freedom of trade around the globe, the value of water, people's preferences in terms of where their food comes from, and their understanding of not only the real value of what can be done with the water they have at the moment.
Yes, well, that issue is certainly alive and well in my country, also in New Zealand, the issue of sovereign funds from North Asia, Middle East, acquiring agricultural land in our country, and I think New Zealand just put a stop to that through some legislation or put it on hold. So it's certainly a controversial topic. And on controversial topics, I have a question here. We haven't got a lot of time left, but question to the panel. Are growers properly rewarded by the supply chain for their investment in sustainability? Nick, would you like to lead off?
Well, if they're not, they should stop growing. Simple as that.
So you believe they are adequate?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah. Anyone else? Albert, would you have a view on that?
Please repeat the question.
Yes, the question is, are growers properly rewarded by the supply chain for their investment in sustainability?
Are we being required by the supply chain to advance sustainability? Was that the question?
Yes, essentially.
Yeah, very much so. It started out in the U.S. primarily through the efforts of one major customer. And this probably started about 6 to 8 years ago. And this wasn't done as a marketing ploy by this company. This company is super serious in sustainability efforts. And it wasn't long before they required their suppliers to toe the line on certain criteria that they felt was important for their green initiative. And to be quite honest with you, it got a lot of us suppliers, even though we were doing some measure of sustainability, to conform to more of a rigid, disciplined set of initiatives around our sustainability issue. And since that time, all the other major retailers in our country have come on board with similar programs. So it's very much top of mind with the American food retailer.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, that does bring us to the end of this session. I think we're very fortunate to have a group of leaders of the industry, not just locally, but globally here today. And I thank each of you for making yourself available. Please join with me in thanking our speakers.
Ladies, gentlemen, a couple of messages before we finish for the night. Thank you, Richard. That was fantastic. A bit of a timeline for some of you, just as a reminder. Some of you will be booked onto a walking tour. That leaves from the Strathblane reception, so that's the registration point at 5:30. Okay. Then 3 more groups are departing from the same location at 6 o'clock. That is the Twilight Tour, the Distillery Visit, and the trip to the Royal Yacht Britannia. And then for our speakers, we have a walking tour leaving the Roxburgh at 6:45. I will see you all at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning with your badges. Enjoy Edinburgh.